When I started working in Stamford in the 70s.
First time I did it, I didn't get it to New York.
We just moved into a new building for our business.
Hello.
So your wife's going to the
Quite an event, quite an event. Here's one of the honorees of the night, of the afternoon, Steinberg. Hey, how you doing, Ethan?
I don't know why, but protocol.
Jack Steinberg, and we will may I take a moment to acknowledge Eileen Nemoitin, Jacob Nemoitin's daughter-in-law. It is important to thank Eileen for her gracious contribution, which was unintentionally omitted from the journal. So these things do happen, but I needed to let you know that she was very generous in her contribution. Our deepest regrets that this did happen. So thank you for understanding, Eileen, wherever you are.
She's right here.
Okay, so she's here.
Yes, stand up.
Okay. This is the afternoon of the two Jacobs. One we are honoring for his outreach and service to the community and beyond, and one we remember as a humanitarian and a healer in the early immigrant community. It is fascinating, this is how they're connected, that the premier dramatic interpretation of the life of Jacob Nemoitin is under the auspices and support of Jack Steinberg, who has had American Connection, which is his agency. Is it an agency? Program. American Connection is funding the Jacob Nemoitin story. So the two Jacobs are connected to this today. So this is called the afternoon of the two Jacobs. Before I begin, it seems appropriate to acknowledge certain groups of individuals. JHS is 25 years old, and we've come this far with past leadership. First of all, may we have all the JHS founders, the ones who decided to start this foundation, just stand and be recognized. A few of them. One who is not among us today, who had every intentions of being here, is Ron Marcus. His interview of Jacob Nemoitin is the foundation of the dramatic presentation today. He was the one who interviewed him, and we got all the facts from this interview. Unfortunately, Ron is in Vermont, recuperating from emergency bypass surgery. We wish him well and a speedy recovery. Thank goodness for videotapes and DVDs. He will have the opportunity to review this program at his leisure. And so will you. We're taping so that you'll be able to review and show other people who might be interested in this program. The next group to recognize. If you were a board member or are a current board member, raise your hand. Great. With your dedication, we celebrate today. It has been a very important task of our archivists to handle our memorabilia. Raise your hand if you have assisted at the JHS archives. You have an important task of managing our treasures. Our Harry Rosenbaum JHS Judaica Library at the JCC has been owned and operated for 26 years. If you are or ever were a JHS librarian, raise your hand. Your service to the community is appreciated. If you have attended any of the book talks that are held at the JCC, held from October to May, raise your hand. Not a book talk. Good. How good it is to keep our minds engaged. And one more, if you have ever attended any of our Sunday monthly programs planned by Erwin, Edith, Dan, Marilyn, or Ava, please raise your hand. It is a gratifying aspect of the JHS that brings the most participation to our community. By the way, how many of you plan to attend the June 28th program at Temple Sinai with Nikki Sherman talking about a Jew grows in Greenwich? You'll see it If you are a member, you'll be getting a postcard about this event, and if you want to join, you can also join today to be assured you get a postcard. In the lobby, which was a very festive and intriguing venue, you witnessed an outstanding, impressive showcase of the many aspects of our JHS. You can read all the details about them in your commemorative booklets. Also, may I remind you that the membership table is open, so if you haven't paid your dues or you would like to join, you still will be able to become a member. And at the book sale, we have 3 wonderful books for sale to add to your personal library, and they're very reasonable. One is Jack's book, I Never Had a Bestseller. One is the pictorial book that was edited by Erwin Miller and Linda Balser. That's $20. And then we have a Koenig book that was a publication that the JHS funded. So, it is time to move on to learn why there is a Jewish Historical Society today. Who better to speak to you but Erwin J. Miller, co-founder, first president, and historian. Erwin?
I'll try. How's that? Better? I can go on and I'll have to stop probably. On September 1982, actually, the seeds of the Jewish Historical Society was presented to a small group of people, roughly about 9 to 10 of us, in a very small, unfinished room at the JCC. The walls were still cinder block at that time. And we decided that things were slipping away. People were vanishing from this area, from the earth, and that if we didn't act fast, Stanford's early Jewish history would disappear. No one would remember what happened. And so the idea was created at that time, and not long afterwards, we were approached by Barbara Hotz, who was forming a Pacific Street exhibit at that time. She said, "Would you please delay the formation of a Jewish Historical Society and assist us in the Pacific Street exhibit?" And we agreed to that. And so it wasn't until September 1983 that we actually had the first formal meeting of a Jewish Historical Society, and with the help of our board and Larry Ginsberg, who was our attorney at that time, got the charter, if you will, in January 1984. And thus we are here today on the 25th anniversary celebrating the formation of a Jewish Historical Society, which is so important because unless our children know and our descendants know and those who are here today know how Stanford, the Jewish community, what they contributed to the community, why it was founded, and why it's so important to know what came before us, who built the synagogues, and why the JCC, how that was created. It evolved from the Hebrew Institute in 1916. Now look what it is today. So the Jewish people not only have contributed something for their own, our own group, but towards the evolvement of the city at large, for the benefit of the city at large. So now we know that the Jews didn't just come when Pacific Street started to form. They came a long time ago, beginning in 1698 to Stamford. And by 1720, we had an early Jewish merchant. And I won't continue further because otherwise I could go on and on. So thank you all very much for being here today.
Stage direction. Please stay. I want to reiterate what our goal at JHS is. JHS preserves the past and the present for the future. You can only chart a future if you know where you've been. Now I would like to all the past and current presidents of JHS to come forward. Past presidents, you know who you are. They're going to stand in order. Yes, chronological order. Takes a little while, but they take direction well. We each have led our wonderful board of directors to reach this day. And all of your remarks are in the journal, so everyone can read them at their leisure. So you can learn about what happened in each of their presidencies, in each of their terms. There is one who is not standing here among us today, who was an extremely dedicated, determined, yet gentle leader in our early days, and he kept involved until his death. That beloved man, it was George Goldberg. We miss him, and he would be proud of this celebration. You are each going to receive a silver something, because we are celebrating Silver Year, and it's a little token of our appreciation that we had this wonderful leadership throughout the years. So let me give you your silver token. Oh, I'm glad you did that. That was without direction. Okay, I'm not, Arnold Yellen, I'm doing them as I find them in my hand. I'm getting Lester Charlack, Julian Reitman, Fred Gollum, David, Arnold Yellen, David Queskin, Fred Gollum, Maggie Levy, there's no room for me, Ava Weller, and these are your presidents who have 25 years and they are very They are monogrammed key rings. Monogrammed key rings with the wording JHS 25th 53109. The Jewish Historical Society is 25 years young. Now it is time to turn to the next part of our program to my co-president, Ava Weller, to present the 2009 JHS Heritage Award to a deserving recipient.
You hear me? Yes, Joe? Good afternoon. It's been a pleasure to serve as co-president of JHS this year, our 21st. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that today has been proclaimed by the mayor as Steinberg Day in honor of your many years of service to the Jewish community and beyond. The mayor's full proclamation is included in the commemorative journal. Please join me in joining Jack for this special afternoon together. And I'm just going to show you the proclamation. Get it up here. So please look for that and see what some of the reasons that they're being honored today. I'm here in an official capacity, but it's a very special personal day for me as well, because I met Jack and Claire 10 years ago, and it's been my privilege to work closely with them over the years as director of the American Connection. More about that later. I hope you got to see some of the displays there. Before we continue, I'd like to thank Kathleen Steinberg and the Steinberg family for their tremendous effort in gathering family photos and commentary to create the PowerPoint. We also used Jack's autobiographical book, Never Had a Bestseller, from which much of their fascinating story is taken. I'm sure you won't be surprised that in keeping with Jack's wishes, proceeds from book sales and program ads will go to educational programming. is indeed appropriate as we present our 2009 JHS Heritage Award to Steinbergs that we look back at their personal history and see where the seeds were planted and how their vision took root. Claire was born in Poland in 1912 in a small town that has been obliterated. She recalled living in what was called a mud hut with dirt floors on the banks of an all-purpose running creek with her mother, 2 brothers, and her father's parents, one of whom was bedridden. Her father had gone to the U.S. in 1913, before World War I, planning to send for his family when he was financially able. The war intervened, and it was not until 1921, when Claire was 8, that she was introduced to her father on Ellis Island. Her brother Bernie was born in the U.S. After they arrived. Jack was born in 1915 in Brownsville, Brooklyn, an entirely Jewish enclave at the time. It became famous as the birthplace of writers and scientists, and notorious because the criminals who also came from there. When Jack was 8, his father became ill, and the family moved to Albany. It was here that Jack had his first encounter with yellow journalism and anti-Semitism. 4 years later, his father died, and the family moved back to Brooklyn. He graduated from Brooklyn College in 1936 and began teaching English in city high schools in 1937. In 1943, Jack and Claire were married and moved in with Claire's parents in Flatbush. It wasn't long before Jack was drafted into the Army. Their son Michael was born in 1944. After a stint as an MP, the Army did some intelligence testing and sent Jack to Portrayal University to learn to speak Mandarin Chinese, and later had to break Japanese codes with ciphers. After the war ended, Jack enrolled in graduate studies in Chinese at Columbia and taught basic Chinese there. All this does have a it's very important to what happens later with his career. Soon he began work as an editor for the New York publisher, which helped prepare him for his own publishing career. In 1949, Jack and Claire founded Twain Publishers, Inc., initially producing translations of Chinese classics. The Twain Authors Series books were by far the major source of Twain sales and included nearly 2,000 critical studies of individual authors and literary movements. Twain also published more than 100 titles of Jewish content and an important immigrant heritage of America series. Jack served as president of the Association of Book Publishers from 1974 to 1981 and led the organization's first delegation to Moscow. He helped organize Jewish book exhibits at the first Moscow Book Fair in 1977, when such books were a dangerous commodity in the Soviet Union. He continued this work biannually for almost 20 years. Jack was also vice president of the Jewish Book Council, which is considered the most prominent pro bono organization that promotes Jewish books in the U.S. The JBC sponsors Jewish Book Month and National Jewish Book Awards. I'm sure you've probably heard of them over the years. Our community was blessed when Jack and Claire moved to Stamford in 1980, shortly before Jack's retirement, to be near their son Michael, a physician, daughter-in-law Betty, and grandsons Brian and Matthew. They joined Temple Beth El. It's no surprise that Jack served as an engineer, member of the board, and was on the Hoffman Memorial Lecture Committee since its inception. Sadly, Michael passed away just 6 years later. In several communities and for more than 50 years, Claire was an active, influential member of DASA. In 1987, she was honored with DASA's highest honor. Later, Claire was recognized for her contributions to Temple Beth El as the third recipient of the Rose Grosvenor Award in 1989. In keeping with her literary interest, the Steinbergs established the first annual Elders' Day at Temple Beth El in 1995 after Jack wrote his own autobiography in 1993. Their vision was to encourage young students to to help in the writing of memoirs and autobiographical accounts by seniors, to ensure appreciation by the students of their elders. An annual award is also made to a distinguished elder of the Temple on Elders Day. When the program was in its 9th year, the award was given to Jack and Claire in recognition of the importance of the program. Jack's service to the Jewish community continued with membership on the Jewish Historical Society Board, where he supported research in local Jewish history. He concurrently served on the board of the American Jewish Committee, Stamford chapter. In their 80s and still inspired, Jack and Claire together established the Charitable Remainder Trust for the Jewish Community Endowment Foundation. That same year, 1999, they were included in the JCEF's Book of Life and shared their vision of the Jewish-led program, reaching out to others to celebrate the contributions of various ethnic and immigrant groups to our nation and the common bond that unites us. That program is the American Connection and flourishes to this day, 10 years later. The American Connection continues to offer excellent programs for students of all ages, having reached thousands of school-aged children. I will mention just a few examples of the American Connection programs, but want to convey the scope and outreach. A complete listing appears in the program. On the first anniversary of 9/11/2002, the American Connection held a standing room-only event at the Rich Forum to acknowledge what being an American means to students through essays, music, and the arts. America's Table, a community-wide Thanksgiving dinner with more than 350 attendees, was held in 2004 to bring groups together to share stories and common experiences. The Student Ambassador Leadership Program for students in middle school teaches understanding and tolerance through learning about immigration and migration and has reached several hundred students over 10 years. Living Voices is a multimedia theme-based program with live actor and archival footage and has engaged hundreds of students just this year alone. We've been in more than 8 schools this year. The Innovation in Education Award recognizes outstanding educators who encourage understanding through the contributions of many ethnic groups. For her part in creating the American Connection and her many years of volunteer service to the community, Claire was recognized in 2001 with the Connecticut Immigration Award. Both Claire and Jack received the Nevis Distinguished Service Award from the American Jewish Committee in May of 2003. Together and separately, Jack and Claire have been recognized for their significant contributions. To Jack, now in his 95th year, as many of you likes to say, and to Claire posthumously, we are so very grateful for their dedication to the Jewish community and their passion to repair the world in the tradition of Kevan Olam. It is my great pleasure and honor to present Jack and Claire Steinberg with the 2009 JHS Heritage Award. Steinberg for their dedication to this important organization, and I commend you for recognizing Dr. Jacob Nemoitin for his many years of public service. Sincerely, Dick Blumenthal. So I think that was very special. I just wanted to show you. This did not fit into the program, so it's here for you to see. Oh!
See, he's still alert.
Almost perfect, but not quite. And
Dr. Jacob Nemoitin, and it's been written and will be acted by Philip M. Garner. He is a playwright and actor. Beth is a member of the Nemoitin family, and she did some interviewing of your families. Okay, so may I introduce a member of the Nemoitin family, Beth Boyer.
Good afternoon. I was asked to interview some of my family members to have them discuss their reminiscences of Dr. Nemoitin, Jacob Nemoitin. Of course, his son Bernie was also Dr. Nemoitin. And I started with my mother, Gayla Schildhouse Albrecht. She now lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I interviewed her last January. And she said to me, Uncle Jake was always so happy and animated. We didn't see him very often. When I was a kid growing up, we lived on Maple Street in Burlington, Vermont. I remember him coming up once. He always carried his camera. He had a big box camera, as I remember. I remember he once took pictures at a funeral with someone in the family. I think when he came to Burlington, it was when my father graduated from medical school. I remember visiting his office once in Stamford. It was in an older part of Stamford, and I think they lived where the office was, and his wife was his nurse. It's hard to remember. I also remember going to a hotel in Stamford, and he was honored by the governor of the state. I think it was Governor Ribicoff. It was a Hilton hotel, and it was a dinner for Uncle Jake. I went with Aunt Jessica and my mother and father, but I can't remember who it was. I also interviewed my Aunt Jessica, who now lives in Florida, Israel. She and my mother both were the grandnieces of Jacob Nemoitin. Their father, Leo, was Jacob Nemoitin's nephew. Jessica says, I was born in Burlington, Vermont, and I still have a silver baby cup, fork, and spoon that Uncle Jake gave me when I was born. I was the first grandchild of the Schildhouse side. When I was 12 or 13, my father and sister, Gayla, and I drove down to New York, and we stayed overnight at Uncle Jake's and Aunt Fanny's house. It was the first time that I saw a television. This was about 1948. I remember it was very jolly, and sometime, maybe a few years later, my grandfather died, Michael Schildhouse, also buried at the old cemetery in Stamford, Village Home. He came up from Norfolk, Virginia, where grandfather was doing his internship, and we went to the funeral. Uncle Jake was taking photos of the family at the funeral. Little Bubby, Jacob's sister, was there. She and Uncle Jake looked more alike than our Kitty. Kitty, who's Jacob's other sister, had two children, Rita and Annette. Both girls married and later divorced. They grew up in Long Island. Rita's daughter came to visit us here in Israel when we made Aliyah and spent a weekend with us. I think my father and their brother, Andrew, were inspired to become doctors by Uncle Jake's example. Then I interviewed my Aunt Ethel. Ethel is the sister, the wife, of Andrew, who's my grandmother's brother. She lives in Burlington, Vermont. You know, we didn't see him very often. Andy and I would stop by in Stamford and see him at his office now and then. He was sometimes forgetful. He'd park his car and forget where he parked it. Once he had to call police to help find it. He was slightly unusual, a bit like an absent-minded professor. He would take potatoes or whatever people had to pay if they didn't have money. His wife took care of the accounts, and the office was at his home. He was also a very primitive artist, and he liked photography too. It was exhibited in Stamford at one point. Jacob was close to his sister, but rarely came to Burlington to visit. I do think he delivered a lot of babies. People that I knew, like Dr. Wallman in Burlington, and his brothers were delivered by Dr. Nemoitin. I saw so little of him. I think his wife kept him private. And then finally I interviewed my grandmother, Rox Schildhouse, who lives in Miami. My grandmother, I should say, turned 100 years old last year. She says, I don't remember him. I know I must have met him at some point, but he must not have made an impression on me. Are you finished painting, Uncle Jake? There are some people here to see you.
I'll be right with them. I'm just making a touch-up. My waiting room has gotten much bigger than I remembered it. Normally, I only see one patient at a time, but today I will make an exception. I am very pleased to be here today. It is so wonderful to see everyone. And if my father was here, he would be very pleased as well. But the circumstances under which my father left Russia were not very good. 112 years ago, in 1897, my father, Joshua Nemoitin, made a heart-wrenching decision that would change his life, my life, and our lives forever. Motivated by the punitive proclamations of Alexander III and a deep desire to live a better life, my father, along with my aunt and uncle, Bella and Isaac Shaman, and thousands of other Russian Jews, immigrated to America, the land of opportunity. I accompanied him on that voyage many years ago. I was 16 years old when I arrived in Manhattan with nothing but a suitcase, a good education, and a teenager's curiosity. I grew up in Byelorussia, in the village of Shushki. It was a beautiful farm-like countryside with pastures and animals and fields and fresh air and food we grew ourselves. My father was educated as a rabbi, but owned a real country store where men would gather to talk about farming and share stories about politics. Both of my parents believed highly in education, but since there were no schools nearby, they hired private tutors to come and teach us. I remember one tutor, Mendel Rohoff, very smart and very demanding, from Riga Gymnasta. He said to me, "Jacob, what are you doing? You need to complete your assignment for tomorrow." The discipline paid off, and I was able to complete my studies ahead of schedule. I went to work as a photographer's apprentice and stayed with my grandfather in Polos, the town where my father was born. Everything was going quite well, and then I received a message from my father. He required me to return to Shushki right away. When I arrived home, my mother, Rebecca, and my sisters, Rose and Kathy, were all waiting for me in the living room, and my father began to speak. "I am a rabbi. You are the children of a rabbi. There is no future here in Russia for us anymore. And worse, if we stay, there may not be a life. The proclamations against the Jewish people are intolerable. If they want us to move on our land, it won't be long before they have us move again and again. Well, this time we shall move on, but to a land where we can have permanent homes. We shall go to America, the land of the free." But it wasn't until several days later, when I was standing on the dock, and I heard the sound of the ship's whistle. Can you hear it? And I knew, deep down, really knew that my life would never be the same. "All aboard! All aboard!" And standing on the stern of the ship, my mother and sisters shrank from view. Rose, Kathy, Mama, I'll see you again soon. My father came up beside me and wrapped a strong arm around me, and slowly we walked to the front of the ship. And he spoke of Alexander III his frustration with the pogroms, and his deep sadness about having to leave his homeland. And we stood on the bow of the ship, he and I, not moving, just holding on to each other. And then he spoke these words: "Half of freedom, Jacob, is like being half alive. In order to live a full life, you must seek full freedom." And we traveled for many days and many nights on the ocean, until one morning I awoke to the sounds on the deck. And when I ran up to see what it was, there, through the rain and the fog and my rolling haze of sleep, there she was, the Statue of Liberty. I couldn't move. I could hardly breathe. And my father came up next to me, and he said, "Jacob, this is the freedom I was talking about." "All ashore! All ashore!" And as we left the ship, I felt men, women, and children all around me, pressing against me, throngs of people lined the streets. My father was acknowledged as a rabbi and treated with the accompanying respect. Vendors and merchants were all clamoring for business. The smells of the street and the food filled me with curiosity and some disgust. I could not believe I was in America. I could not believe it. One little German boy came running up to me and said, "Wie geht es Ihnen? How are you?" "Wie geht es Ihnen?" he said. "Wie geht es Ihnen? Wie geht es Ihnen?" He went around asking everybody the same question. My father and I stayed in New York City, living with my cousin, my father's cousin, who had come over before. For a while, we didn't do much of anything except stay in the apartment and take short walks around the block. But we were becoming accustomed to our new home. Then my father heard about the famous rabbi who helped immigrants, and he went to visit him at his synagogue in Manhattan. And that rabbi said to him, "Joshua, you need to find a small community where you can begin a new life." And that's just what happened. 3 men from Stamford, a Mr. Rosenblum, Mr. Rosenberg, and Mr. Fellner, all came to the same synagogue to visit the same rabbi on the same day that my father was there. They were looking for someone to officiate on Sabbath, inspect meat, and teach the children how to pray. After talking with my father, I hired him on the spot. In a short time, my father was able to buy a 2-story building on Pacific Street. Do you remember Pacific Street?
Oh, yeah.
On Pacific Street, which laid the groundwork for the foundation of the first synagogue and Jewish school in Stamford. For the time being, I remained in New York City to pursue my education. I obtained my Regents Diploma at New York Preparatory Academy and enrolled in Columbia University Medical School. While I was working during the day as a photographer's apprentice, I was one of only a few Jewish students. Tuition was $100 a year plus books, which I was able to pay very well. At first, it was very difficult to me, the studies, but the discipline I learned in Russia helped me very much, and I was able to graduate in good order with my classmates. For my residency, I was accepted at Beth Boyer Hospital in Manhattan, where I met my future wife. Frances Einhorn had immigrated from Russia before my father and I arrived. She was a student nurse, very competent and very pretty. Our friendship developed into a romance, and on a breezy summer afternoon, on a farm, my father's farm in the Catskill Mountains of New York, in 1906, under oak and maple trees, bounded by wheat fields, a shortly setting sun, in the presence of God and family, Frances Einhorn and I were married. And my father, Joshua Nemoitin, presided on the ceremony. Now, Frances and I lived in Manhattan as Nemoitins. She had her private nursing practice, and I began my work as a doctor. I began my work as a doctor renting office space at 215 East Broadway from a dentist who also practiced there. Now, because I left my light on in the evening, patients with severe tooth pain would come to see me. And I remember a Polish woman asking me, "Dr. Nemoitin, are you a dentist?" Well, she didn't wait for my complete answer. She was in such pain. And after I removed her infected tooth, she said, "You did a better job than my regular dentist," and we both laughed. My wife had a relation in Manhattan at the time, a Professor Max Einhorn. He was a prominent gastroenterologist. And he would send me patients for gastric lavage, washing of the stomach. So in this way, working at both ends, so to speak, I was able to pay my rent, and Frances and I could save a little bit of money. Now, one thing I want, Frances and I were able to save a little bit of money. As luck would have it, a house became available in Stamford at 96 Main Street. This house was large enough to house living quarters and an office, which also became a painting studio. The timing could not have been better. Shortly after we moved in, Frances delivered our son, Bernard. We named him after my grandfather. He was born on January 30th, 1909. This worked out very well for us. He was a fat, healthy, happy baby boy who loved to smile and play. One regret, and I don't have many, would be to have been home when he was born. But that was one of the sacrifices I made for my healing heart. And I believe Frances knew that, and it was okay. Many of my colleagues went to work at large hospitals, but I was inclined to work with the immigrants in Stamford because, like many of you here today, I was one too. I could not charge a proper fee in many cases. In fact, oftentimes I didn't charge anything at all and left money behind, or I would bring a bucket of coal to help heat the house. Please, you take this gift. By accepting this, you honor me and you honor your family. It is okay. I will put it here for you. Now, when I arrived in Stamford, I was told I would have access to the hospital facilities. But because of one woman, the superintendent in charge of the hospital, I was prevented at every turn from obtaining that access. Her dislike of Jews prevented me from doing that, and my frustration at this became too much. And I told Frances, I said, "Frances, we must leave Stamford. The actions of this woman have become intolerable." And she said to me, "Jacob, your patients need you. This situation will pass. It will be okay." And of course, she was right. She was absolutely right. As I was getting to become known amongst the immigrant community in Stamford, a pharmacist approached me, a short, well-built fellow named Mr. Champagne from Brazil, and he said to me, "Dr. Nemoitin, I think it would be good if you would give your prescriptions from your patients to me, and I will refer my customers to you." This was a very good arrangement for both of us and for all of my patients. And look now, what I need to tell you now is that when we were in Stamford at 96 Main Street, in the office here, I would make my first house calls when I initially started by bicycle. Now, bicycle was not a very efficient form of transportation at the time. And I was able, at some point, I was able to buy a horse and buggy, okay? Before I bought the horse and buggy, when patients needed me right away, I would make arrangements with the delivery people in Stamford. And whenever I asked them, the response was always the same. Dr. Jake, whatever it is, the coal, the ice, the milk can wait. Your patients cannot. Come, get on. Now, so the first horse that I bought had the breathing problem. So we traded him in for a second, and that one became nervous and unreliable. So finally we got the third one, and we kept that one for several years. But I would often forget, in wintertime, the horse blanket. And if I was meeting with my patients and having a conversation reminiscing about the old country inside, the poor horse was outside freezing. Now my wife was very concerned for the horse. And I can see her now saying, Jacob, you forgot the horse blanket again. And she would bring it out and cover up the horse. So when I bought my first automobile, I couldn't tell you who was happier, the horse or my wife. Now, having a car didn't help my problems that much. When I was making my rounds in the tenements on Pacific Street, I would often forget where I parked my car. The children found this very amusing, as I see some of you do too. And they would all scramble around to be the first one to find my car, no matter who found it first. They all got money for treats. Many of them knew who I was, because their mothers told them. You see that man over there? That is Dr. Nemoitin, the famous Jewish doctor. He has delivered thousands of babies in Stamford, including you, and you, and you, and you. Now, oftentimes, I would forget to turn in the names of the birth to the town office. I was so busy. In fact, I think I have some names here that I still need to turn in. Here they are. I have them here. Let's see here. Lester Charlock. Ronald Marcus. Shirley Schulman. Frida Goldblum. Harold Knopf. Okay. Arnold Yellen. Barbara Sherman. Adele Weisberg. Gail Gruber. Didn't I deliver your father too?
Yes.
Now, I remember 3 instances where this caused quite a problem. There was a young man named Sherman who was enlisting in the Army Medical Corps, and he needed his birth certificate. When he turned it into the sergeant at the enlisting station, the sergeant looked at it and read, Sherman, baby girl. And there was another resident who went looking for his birth records and found out he was registered as Norma Crutchcow instead of the Norman Crutchcow. And I recall poor Ethel Levitsky never existed until she went to obtain a marriage certificate, at which time she got to register herself. Many patients, I held many patients when other doctors couldn't help. The family of an Italian girl named Sophia all gathered around for the candlelight vigil, waiting for her to die, because a prominent doctor had told the parents the prognosis is very bad. I consulted Mr. Champagne, the pharmacist, about the situation, and he asked me, did you treat the girl for worms, Jacob? That's a very common problem among Italian immigrant children. What did I have to lose? When I left the house, I felt very uncertain about if this treatment would work because she was so sick. Well, I arrived several days later, and the father was outside, and I said to him, Come stai, Celia? Come stai, bambina? How many words did she pass? And with a big smile, he said, "Due vermi piccolo e due vermi grande." 2 little ones and 2 big ones. And she made a complete recovery. Now, there was another little boy, a Italian boy in New Canaan, also near death. And Dr. Stella, a prominent physician in Manhattan, called me and said, Dr. Jacob, no other doctor will treat this boy for fear of their own death. He is very sick. Can you help? And there was no question whether I could help. He said, you can charge whatever you want. Now, in those days, New Canaan was quite a distance away. Well, when I arrived on my first visit, I gave the boy some rubbing alcohol, phlogiston, opens a window, some general instructions, and the boy made a remarkable recovery. The father said to me, Dr. Nemoitin, you will save my boy when no other doctor would. You are the savior himself. How can I ever thank you? Whenever someone comes into my store, if he is sick, I am going to refer him to you. And I couldn't be happier. Well, I found out sometime later he was killed by a runaway horse. But I never forgot his gratitude. It meant a lot to me. Many times when I was working with the patients, I would really work with them to get a sense of what they needed from me. The children on the street loved my way with them. They thought it was very, very happy to have Dr. Nemoitin come and take care of them. I remember a Polish family I helped. Now, with the other case, I could charge a large fee, but that was not the case many times. My wife, who was the bookkeeper in the family, would get angry with me. And one time she said to me, Jacob, you are not to see this patient anymore unless he puts $10 on account today. You understand? And I did. I had to, otherwise I had a problem with my marriage. So the patient came in, and after examining him, I told him, you need to give this $10 to my wife in order for me to continue to treat you, okay? Later that night, I asked Frances, I said, Frances, did that patient pay you? And she said, oh yes, he put $5 on account. It didn't bother me. I felt blessed with given a healing gift. And if it could help someone else, I didn't think it was right to turn them away if they didn't have the money. Still, I remember the look on her face when I came home and there was an icebox in the kitchen. I said, what? It's from the Charlottes for delivering their son, Lester. She was unmoved. Well, many of my patients were not in financial positions to pay much of anything at all. And this was the case with a Polish family I helped. As I recall, they lived at 61 Liberty Street and came referred to me by Mr. Champagne, the pharmacist. I arrived at 61 Liberty Street on a very hot summer afternoon, parked my bicycle outside the building, walked up the 4 flights of stairs, and knocked on the apartment. When the mother opened the door, I saw the look of concern on her face. And I said, hello, my name is Dr. Nemoitin. Naziwan si lekars Nemoitin. And when I spoke in her native language, I saw that look I had seen it many times before. It was a look of relief, of comfort, of safety, and most importantly, of a possible found trust. Nice to meet you, Dr. Nemoitin, she said. My son Victor is very sick. You help him, please. And I said, don't worry, don't worry. Where is the patient? And she brought me over to Victor's bedside. Victor, I said, my name is Dr. Nemoitin. I am going to take very good care of you. How old are you? And he held up 6 fingers. Now, after examining the boy, I told the parents some pus had developed in his chest. So the pus needed to be drained, which required an operation because there was no penicillin. Penicillin hadn't been invented yet. And I saw the look of concern on their face, and I said, don't worry. I have done this operation many times while I was at Beth Israel Hospital. And they agreed. I can't say they were completely relieved, but they agreed it was necessary. So I called my associate, Dr. Dichter, to assist me with the surgery. And we opened up his chest on the kitchen table, inserted the tube, and the pus drained out. The boy made a remarkable recovery, but it was a very slow process which required daily visits on my part. This woman was a very proud woman. She had 6 more children. Her husband, as a father, made $6 a week, working 10 hours a day as a carpenter. So naturally, my fee to that was very low. And one day, she came up to me and said, before I left, "Dr. Nemoitin, I see how hard you try to save my son, but I don't have any money. If God wants him to die, let him die. Let him die." I was shocked and saddened when I heard those words. And I went up to her, and I took her hands, and I looked her in the eye, and I said, "Oh me, how crucifix. Oh no, that could not be. I have become very fond of your son. I could not think to stop caring for him. You pay me whenever you have the money, and if you don't have it, you don't have to pay. Je couche. Thank you," she said. And fighting her own tears and shame, she kissed me on the cheek. For her son. For her son. It was a very beautiful moment for me. Well, the boy made a complete recovery. When I would see him in the street, he would be running around and he would say, "Oh look, there's Dr. Nemoitin. That is the famous doctor. He saved my life." And he would come running over and want to ride in the horse and buggy, which I always gave him, and we would go down to the store and buy some treats. Well, some time had passed, and I didn't see him in the town anymore, and I wondered about his health. Well, word came to me that his health was fine, but the family moved to New Jersey, Perth Amboy. I said to friends, "What's this New Jersey? Why would people move to New Jersey?" But that's where they were. And I didn't see him again. Well, years passed. My son, Bernard, was accepted to medical school. And on the first day of class, he tells me, he meets a young Polish boy named Rudy, who had a scar on his chest from an operation I had given him years ago when the family lived in Stamford. I thought, and I couldn't remember a patient named Ruby. So the next weekend, he says, the boy's name was Victor, the family name was Rudemansky, and they lived at 61 Liberty Street on the 4th floor. Can you imagine? A boy whose life I saved is now in medical school with my son. Well, more time passed, and I was reading a medical journal one day, and I came across an article written by a doctor at Boston Hospital for Children. The article was about treating children with pus in the chest, and it was written by Dr. Victor Rudemansky, who was now treating children just as I had done. If any of you young men and women in my waiting room here today want to practice medicine, I think the first requirement of you is that you love people. Really love people. So if any of you are inclined to be that way, I encourage you to practice medicine. Now I must go to see my next patient. Thank you very much.
Wow. This is what's so wonderful about the Jewish Historical Society. All of this material Historical Society. But it's amazing what you can do with history. So I'm just glad that you are here to support our Silver Celebration, that there should be more celebrations, and it has been a complete success. And before we close for our festive desserts, Rabbi Harriman has walked in. If you'd like to say a couple of words, because everybody is waiting for the dessert. So, thank you for coming.
Greetings. I'm so glad to open the program. Anyway, unfortunately, I had a funeral which you may have heard about, and I couldn't be here, but I promised Jack I would get here, and looks like you already are loaded down with loot. So I came a little late to honor you, but maybe I can at least acknowledge the honor that you got and the Jewish Historical Society so rightfully is getting today. It is very fitting, by the way, that we are sitting in this room because this room is about to become history. At the end of June, these wagon wheel light fixtures will be history. In fact, we're going to donate all of them to the Jewish Historical Society. All right, you want one? You can take one, definitely. This room is being remodeled and will look spanky new and beautiful by Labor Day. So we keep up to date, even though this building is already even older than the Jewish Historical Society. I brought with me, and I don't know if the Society has the archives, all of the booklets that we put together for Elders Day. Over the decade or so, Jack and Claire contributed so many things to have contributed so many things to our community and to Bethel. But Elders Day was maybe the most lasting, one of the most lasting, because while he may never have had a bestseller, at least Jack claims, these booklets from Elders Day were in fact bestsellers. They were distributed widely throughout the community, celebrating, paying tribute to some of the great leaders, elders of our congregation and our community. And one year, in fact, we honored Bernie Nemoitin, and his comments are found in here. So this is my only copy. But if the Jewish Historical Society doesn't have a full set, I would be happy to donate it. If you would take one of the wagon wheel, anyway, I won't. I'm between you and dessert right now. I'm so happy to be here and so proud to be Jack's rabbi and to have served him as he has served us for so long. And of course, Claire, a blessed memory as well. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. And now, can I just add something? I think in this audience there are a lot more Dr. Nemoitin babies, and I think all of us should stand up.
Okay, I like that Brenda Smith suggests that if you were a Nemoitin baby, you should stand up. Okay, now we can all say it together. Open the curtain!
Open the curtain.